Welcome to a special program called COVID-19 and brought to you by Newsroom. My name is Vindhya Persaud, and on this program, I'll be sharing lots of great information through interviews with various persons from the healthcare field, and they will be bringing their expertise to you as you deal with COVID-19, as the world deals with COVID-19. So once again, welcome to COVID-19 and you. Today with me on the program is Miss Riza Khan. I'd like to welcome Riza, and she's a counseling psychologist, and we'll be speaking on a very important subject, and it's called our coping skills. Now, we need to have those employed at all times, but in COVID-19, we need to perhaps pull a little harder when it comes to our coping skills to get us through things like staying at home with people in the same space 24 hours a day and adhering to all the guidelines to keep us safe. So welcome, Riza, and let's talk about how we can cope through COVID-19.
Thank you, Vindy, for having me. Much appreciated, just because I think that for a long time we have been dealing with the medical side of COVID-19. And I think more and more now, especially on the news and stuff, we're hearing people talking about mental health and social issues. So I'm very glad that we're able to talk today about coping skills, coping strategies. So I want to start today with just going into, what is coping skills and strategies, basically. So basically, coping skills, and also known as coping strategies, is anything that persons are consciously trying to use to resolve any either personal or interpersonal problems that they may have, with the intent to resolve or at least tolerate things like stress, anxiety, worry, nervousness. And so those are conscious efforts, sometimes not so conscious, which we'll talk about a little later, but at least conscious efforts to reduce or tolerate the intense emotions we might be feeling at this time.
Well, there are types of coping skills and coping strategies, and you employ those in various different ways. So how can you tell us a little bit about the types and maybe give examples of these types so that persons can relate to them?
Sure. So when we look at the different, there's healthy and unhealthy. So, but the broader spectrum of looking at coping mechanisms is that there are different types. There's self-soothing. So these are persons who may use a technique that we call 5 sense grounding. So you're going to use your 5 senses to ground you in the present, because I think a lot of times we get carried away with our overthinking or our emotions or our thoughts. And so you want to use, for self-soothing, people might use the 5 senses. So what am I hearing? What am I smelling? We encourage people to use an object. You're drinking your coffee, your morning coffee, your tea, you just woke up, you already feel overwhelmed. Using your 5 senses, you can tune into the present and use that as a calming technique. There's another type that we call opposite action. So opposite action is basically you're going to do the opposite of what your brain is telling you. So you're going
to use...
That's
a tough one.
It is, and it's also known as another technique called acting as if. And so acting as if the world is not crumbling as much as you feel it is. And so these often persons might use something like affirmations, so positive affirmations, understanding that, yes, it is a difficult time, but, I am a strong person. I am a determined person. I'm going to get through this. So positive affirmations and stuff like that. So those are some of the opposite actions that we might use. A very common one, which is distraction. So this is type of coping mechanism that many persons utilize. So this is your Netflix binging, your movies, your music, puzzles, books, that kind of thing, crafting. Often people use distraction coping mechanisms way more than any other emotional related coping mechanisms. We have things like mindfulness. And so these are things like meditation, to use, again, still in the category as self-soothing, I suppose, but it has its own category. And so we're looking at meditation, yoga. This is deep breathing exercises as well. There are 2 that we traditionally use sometimes in therapy. One is called 4-8-7. It's a little bit difficult for persons who are trying for the first time. So I do 4-4-4. So that's breathe in for 4 through your nose, hold for 4 in your chest, and release for 4. Of course, as you get better and better over time, you can actually do the 4-8-7, which is breathe in for 4, hold for 8 seconds, and then release very slowly through the mouth for 7 seconds. And so this is extremely helpful, particularly at this time with COVID, when respiratory issues are being considered, as well as persons who may have asthma, as well as people who may be feeling panic and thinking and going into a panic attack and thinking, oh my God, I have corona, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Well, just remember your 4-4-4. So that's what we encourage people with mindfulness. So this is mindfully doing things, calming yourself, calming others around you. And then of course we have emotional wellness. This is journaling. This is creative writing. In CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the therapy I use primarily, of course, along with other ones, journaling is considered one of the major essentials within therapy, because we're able to tap into what am I feeling. Now, some people might be like, oh, is this like Dear Diary kind of thing? Not necessarily. If you want to write it in that way, there's no wrong or right way to journal. And so for journaling, we encourage persons to write down what they're feeling emotionally. Okay, so this morning I woke up and I was overwhelmed. This morning I woke up and I was very conflicted with what I'm hearing on the news. And, and you want to write those emotions. And then I always tell people, use a little line, a little arrow, and say, well, what was the thought that created that emotion? Or you can do it the other way around. I woke up thinking all of these negative things, and how did it make me feel? Right? So you can start with journaling very simply like that. So those are the types.
Right. So there are different categories of people who are dealing with COVID-19 differently because of responsibility. You may have parents, you may have employers, people who are in positions where they not only have authority, but they have great responsibility for dependents. How would you advise them using any of the techniques to reduce stress and anxiety at this point in time?
Right. So coping mechanisms are going to be very specific to you or to that person. And so there's a whole host of coping mechanisms. Now, all coping mechanisms are not designed equally, in the sense that I just went through the positive ones. And I wanted to take a moment just to talk about the negative, what we consider negative coping mechanisms, because I think that is sometimes the natural responses people have to stress. And so some of those negative coping mechanisms, which we might be seeing people using. And of course, if you recognize that you are using these, I encourage you to use some of the positive ones that we spoke about. Binge eating. We're going to see a lot of people, all the memes online, oh, I'm going to come out looking this big after the quarantine. So binge eating and snacking, very considered very negative coping mechanism. These are the emotional eaters. I remember I was sitting down with some nurses once, and they're like, so are you telling me it's bad if I go home and eat a tub of ice cream? And I'm like, if you're having a bad day, of course the nurses are going to have a hard times like this, going home and sitting down eating a whole tub of ice cream and then thinking that's going to make you feel better, and you don't, and you keep trying to eat more and more to make yourself feel better, then yeah, that might be considered a negative coping mechanism. You have people who are also using a lot of misusing alcohol and other drugs. We forget alcohol is a depressant, and that means that it's going to make you feel worse. It just makes you feel better in the moment, I suppose. And I always tell people that whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment, alcohol is going to amplify that. So if you're anxious, you're going to feel worse. If you're feeling depressed, it's going to make you feel worse. So I encourage persons not to use excessive alcohol during this time. Persons might also be further isolating. Now, there's a difference between self-isolation due to a concern of getting sick, and then people who may be isolating. So these are persons who, even when given the opportunity to interact with people or ask for help or to reach out to a colleague or a family member, are choosing to go home, get some food, and go and eat in their room and stay in their room for the rest of the night. So these are some of the things we're seeing persons do: overthinking, and not knowing when to disengage with media. it's okay to, to turn off the radio or turn off the TV, or not engage in disagreements with people about, oh, is this person doing it right? Is that person doing right? One of the number one things I tell people to do in terms of coping mechanisms is know when you've had your level of absorption is there, when you've had enough of taking in information, because that's, I think, what really makes people feel very confused and overwhelmed. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Do we wear a mask? Should we not wear a mask? Which of course we now know we all should be wearing masks. So those are some of the negative things. And I encourage people that if you recognize that you're doing that, to definitely consider some of the positive things, because there's a whole host of, to get back to your original question, a whole host of things that persons can be doing. This is a great time, because a lot of what's happening right now is people often feel very out of control. They don't have a control. They're sleeping, they're eating, their hours, their kids are not in school, they're not doing enough work. So I often tell people, do things that help bring back a sense of control and normalcy. And so we want to encourage people, organize your stuff, go through sorting through things, donate. This is a great time to donate to people, because there are persons who are struggling right now to, food and clothing and masks and protective gear, asking people for help at this time. I actually was telling a client the other day, are you able to take a mental health moment, and do you know how to ask for that? And they're like, how do I ask for a mental health moment? Especially when we're not talking about mental health in our home. I think that everyone should know that you're entitled to say, can I just have a break right now?
Right.
Can I just go with my cup of tea on the veranda? Just give me 5 minutes. And in those moments, if you want to do your deep breathing exercises, your meditation, maybe you want to do some stretches, maybe you just want to plug in your earphones and listen to a few like cheery songs.
So you're disengaging for a little bit.
Right, in a conscious effort, in a positive conscious effort, right? And for those persons who are religious, if it is that, another one of my clients said that they were using, these chants and stuff like that. And so that was very helpful. Some persons are praying. By all means, it's okay to ask for a mental health moment, and just doing that once a day, so that we have some time for ourselves. People are, I always tell people, everyone's got to eat. So cooking, baking, those kinds of things are also important. Trying new recipes. When I was concerned about my own immune system and the immune system of members of my family, I went and I Googled immune boosting recipes, meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And so you're also, you can get creative like that. I tell persons to, chores are going to happen, and cleaning has become a part of our routine now, whether you like it or not. And so I always told people, if you have kids or teenagers or younger adults, make it competitive. Make it like who can clean the room fastest or better or whatever, or who can organize the space, who can support the younger kids to get their homework done, gets a reward at the end of the week. Whether that's a drive or like, making something together, so you have to kind of make it, I think, holistic.
Incentivize it a little bit. Yeah,
you have to incentivize, especially if for persons who have kids. Like you talked about the different, people who are working, people who might even be like vendors who are not vending now anymore.
Right.
People have families, they have kids, so we have to be able to make the coping mechanisms as holistic as possible. And it hopefully it suits everyone. But again, coping mechanisms are going to be geared towards what, again, the definition helps you either reduce what you're feeling, the negative feelings you're feeling, or it helps you tolerate it. One thing I would definitely recommend people do is set a schedule. Go back to routine, go back to schedules. It's going to be very overwhelming for someone who has spent several years, and even your kids, waking up at the same time every day, and all of a sudden, oh, it's a free-for-all, right? So going back to scheduling, I encourage people to at least 1 hour a day for something social, something family-oriented, something work-oriented. Maybe you have to do work, maybe they have to do schoolwork. you're trying to kind of schedule in such a way that they're not bombarding you while you're doing your work, but then you get to be there to oversee their homework, right? So you want to make it organized, because I think within the confusion, there's just not enough, like someone
Structure.
said to me, yeah,
Yeah.
there's not enough boundaries. People are like, right, I'm doing work at midnight. That's not my working hours. I
Right.
don't know how to disengage
And
with
then
my,
there's going to be difficulty transitioning back when we are out of this period, because your whole cycle will be in upheaval.
yep,
But there's a
exactly.
population that we are not always talking to and finding out how they're doing, and that's the teenage and the young adult population.
Yep.
Could you address that population as it comes to coping? Because
Right.
their concerns and their challenges might be a little different. What would you say to them?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I feel for the teenagers, because I feel like we have our routines. We have, okay, we have clients, we got to go into the office, we got to do this, I got to pay my bills, whatever. They have their routines, yes, but they're still in the process of developing themselves. So they get to figure out their identities and what they like and what they don't by interaction. So if they're not interacting with schoolmates or classmates or their teachers, they're going to have a hard time during this time, because they're not getting that back and forth validation and interaction, which is really important for like identity development. And so they might also be feeling really stopped in their tracks, because, for example, the people preparing for CXC, you may have had your whole plan. I'm going to do my CXCs, I'm going to apply to UG, I'm going to apply to University of the West Indies, and I'm out of here, like bye, I got my life to continue doing. And so I can imagine what it can feel very like you've been stopped in your tracks. So it's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion. What do I do now? And I encourage persons and teenagers, you love your phone, but you got to get out of it, right? At some points in time, like I said, I encourage people to interact with their families, do some crafting, do some drawing, painting, anything that helps you relax. And then always I always tell people it's okay to have like a little freak out, like a little venting, a little sad moment. But I always tell people, this adults included as well, vent, your 20 minutes, your 30 minutes, cry it out, get out your frustration, and then ask yourself, what do I do about it? I always encourage people, always move on to problem solving, because if we get stuck in that emotion,
And that's the key thing, problem solving. Yeah.
right, we're not going to keep moving. We're not going to be able to move on from that emotion. It's okay to have the emotion, process it, and then move on. And so by being able to say, okay, what do I do about it? Well, I had this plan and now it might not happen. Well, what can I do to tweak it? Can I do an additional set of courses? Can I pull up the amount of courses I can do so I still finish on time? Maybe I'm a dancer, someone in your dance group. Oh, we had this show planned. I put in so much work and efforts. Keep practicing. You're at home. If you have the space, put on a video and you and your dance partner dance them across the internet through your phones, so still keep that activity going, still engage in, group video chats with your friends, so that disconnect, that doesn't feel more like someone said, self-isolation is not necessarily the end of the world. And someone made a good point that friendship is not canceled, love is not canceled, finding yourself is not canceled, going for walks is not necessarily canceled either. Taking your dog for a walk in the afternoon is not, your police are not gonna, hopefully not gonna collect you off of the road once it's
Yeah.
once it's
I
not
want to interject here. You spoke about the adult population, you spoke about the younger population, but because everyone's under the same roof and perhaps seeing more of each other than they ever saw of each other for some time, there might be some pushback on both sides. How can the generations deal with each other?
Right. And I think that, and I was explaining this to a family session the other night. I said, this is a time when you're going to really learn to practice patience, respect, understanding, and recognizing that you're all in the same boat. So if your mom is scratchety or your younger brother is naggy, it's because they're feeling the same emotions that you are as well. And that once you understand that and you take a step back and you use those calming techniques and your breathing techniques, and maybe you'll use some journaling and you'll come back out of your room and be like, you know what, let's do something together. Okay, I know we're a little scratchy right now. How about we make something? How about we do something together? But also knowing when, and that's for families who can get along. There are families who just really cannot get along. And in those cases, I encourage people to recognize, for lack of better words, the toxicity of your family, and being and understanding that, it may or may not have always been this way. It's just that we had the safety of school and them going out to work and then not being home all the time. And at that point in time, I'd recommend people to put up boundaries and recognizing that, they might provoke you, they might try to engage you in arguments, don't engage. Just don't engage. Okay, I was supposed to put out the garbage. Okay, sure. I'm going to go and put out the garbage. Kind of ignore any kind of verbal abuse that might come your way. And I spoke about this about a month ago. I had done a live and I explained to them that I already could foresee that the level of domestic violence
will rise
and child abuse and these kinds of things. And it's very concerning because I was helping someone the other day with a domestic violence case. And I remember messaging a colleague and I said, you do realize that there's a potential that, and I can't say this for all of the shelters, but that some shelters may say, well, we don't want to take you in because you may run the risk of bringing corona here. And so I said, what are we doing to prepare for that? What are we doing, either training staff-wise or preparing Guyanese for the fact that we may hit a place where shelters...
There are no safe spaces on demand.
And so that was one of the concerns I was trying to work around the past week or so, trying to figure out what do we do for persons like that. But I do understand that if it is that you are feeling unsafe in your home, that you definitely need to reach out. And so this might be speaking to a friend. This might be asking just on Facebook, hey, who knows a psychologist? Who knows a number for Child Protection Agency? Who knows a number for help and shelter? And let's take it from there. Like, do not engage with persons who have a history of either verbal abuse or any other forms of abuse, because this is just not the time, because you are really isolated with these perpetrators. And so I know that's off the topic of coping mechanisms, but it's important.
It's very relevant to what's happening.
Right. So those who are listening and they're like, okay, Riza, I'm coping, but like, what do I do about my abusive family member? Okay, well, we have something for you as well, some information for you as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So the time just seems to fly by, and people are dealing with so many things. There are financial stressors, there's the whole concept of survival, the bigger one of health. And everybody's thinking about, if it happens to me, then what? And that's the thing that's driving a lot of fear out there. Yeah. And coping mechanisms should kick in, but we're not all equal in how we can employ and how they can work for us. So because COVID is real, because while you might be directly affected or indirectly because someone else might be COVID positive, what do you want to say at this point in time to everyone who's listening, specifically dealing with COVID-19, the fear that's just out there?
Right. I just want to encourage persons to, it's natural. It's natural to be scared. It's natural to have fear. But what I encourage persons is to recognize when that fear is becoming unhealthy, when that anger is becoming unhealthy, when that depression or sadness is becoming unhealthy. And if that's the case, then you need to be able to reach out and ask for help, ask for some support. And this may not come from your immediate family, and that's okay too. I think we have this assumption that, oh, we're supposed to be a family and we're supposed to help each other. And everybody has their own stuff going on. But you should be able to say, okay, can I speak to someone? Can I speak to a professional? And just try to remain calm. And like I said, go into that problem solving whereby, okay, I know what I'm feeling. I know what I'm feeling is not healthy. What do I do about it?
Right. And I know you also help people. Maybe you can just give a website that you have, a Facebook link that you have, so that persons can tap into your helpline too.
Right. So that's what I mean. If persons, I am not all knowing, but if persons message me, I am going to try my best to refer them to persons who can help, like I did with the DV case recently, and as well as encourage them to read things, view things, videos, that kind of stuff. My page, which is Anira Counseling and Psychological Services, ANIRA Counseling and Psychological Services, has tons of material, and I have been focusing a lot of my posts and videos. Actually, right after I come off of this, I'm going to be doing a live on the page. And so answering people's FAQs, it can be anything from COVID to relationships. It's free for all at that point in time. But a lot of the posts recently have been geared towards COVID-19 and managing your emotions, managing your mental health. And so I encourage people to join support groups, join online pages that are either in your hobby or interest, or that can give support, mental health support during this time.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Riza. And you're listening to Riza Khan, and she is a counseling psychologist. Thank you for sharing, Riza. And I'm sure those who would have listened to you, they would have gained a lot of what you shared. They probably might want to know more, so they'll be reaching out to all the resources that you have shared with them. So thank you, and it is always a pleasure to share through COVID-19 and you, brought to you by Newsroom. Once again, thank you for watching, everyone, and continue to tune into this series. Thank you, Riza.
Thank you, Lindy. Take care.